Stephen Friend is a former FBI special agent turned whistleblower. He testified to Congress that the agency he worked for was manipulating cases and data, and a lot of it in the wake of the January 6th Capitol riot, sometimes to make it look like domestic terrorists are around every corner in America. He spoke to Congress, and he told them that's just not so, and that conservative Americans are being unfairly targeted. I want you to welcome to our show in Nashville a true hero and a voice of courage, Stephen Friend. Give him a big welcome. Stephen, I'm honored to have you here. You've written a spellbinding book that really goes into this. It's called True Blue. It's your story. But it doesn't start with all of your time at the FBI, but it really starts, you were a kid growing up, you went to the military, you served with honor, you were a cop for a while in the local area, ended up getting to the FBI, which for most police officers is kind of like the pinnacle. Then some things started happening that you knew weren't the way they were supposed to be. When was the first inkling that something wasn't quite the way it's supposed to go?
You know, after I transferred to Florida in 2021, and I took the transfer to work on child pornography cases. And after a few months, my executive management reassigned me to work on domestic terrorism. And I was concerned about the cases I was working. And they said that those were going to be a local matter and no longer resourced. And that to me was a watershed moment, because the priorities of the FBI and for law enforcement in general, I think that crimes against children should always be paramount.
I think all of us would agree with that. But there are people at the top levels of the FBI that decided that they were going to pursue and prosecute every single person they could find who just attended the rally on the Capitol January 6th. And you personally saw some people that were targeted that did nothing wrong. They were waved in by a Capitol police officer. They didn't steal anything. They didn't hurt anyone. They didn't break anything. They walked in, looked around, and they walked out because they were told that they could. But they were still targeted. Was that what kind of bugged you to see that?
Yes, I think that the FBI has now embraced this mindset. The process is the punishment for so many people. And in the case you're talking about, this was a gentleman who had gone to President Trump's speech. He'd walked over to the Capitol. He'd asked for permission to walk into the people's house. The police gave him that permission. And here we were interviewing him, and we couldn't even tell him what his fate would be because it was out of our hands. And that, to me, is not in keeping with the tradition of law enforcement.
Stephen, there was another thing, and you talk about it in your book, and I thought it was very concerning. There were times when the FBI used SWAT teams to go and make arrests for people who had committed what turned out to be a misdemeanor. You were on the SWAT team, and you challenged this thinking to your superiors and were told, maybe you don't belong here.
Yes, I was a SWAT team member for 5 years. It's certainly a legitimate law enforcement tool, and I think that it has its time and its place. But for this case, this was a gentleman who had pledged to be cooperative. And I honestly felt like I was the person the day before Waco or the day before Ruby Ridge in that office saying, I got to throw the flag on this, guys. And the response that I got from them was just woeful ignorance. And it was a situation that they'd never even considered anything bad could possibly happen. And they said to me, Steve, you have a really great reputation, career in front of you. Are you sure you want to sacrifice it for this?
But you did have the courage to challenge some of the things that were being done because you knew it didn't go to the way you had been trained as an FBI agent, and it was unnecessary. It was an over-the-top use of force that wasn't necessary, and as you said, could be dangerous. Somebody could get hurt when a SWAT team shows up. They don't know why.
No, and here's the thing. We received training in the FBI Academy. We go to the Holocaust Memorial Museum. We go to the MLK Memorial. And the purpose of that is to hammer home that those sort of civil rights violations and genocide and atrocities can only occur if law enforcement just follows orders and goes along, and nobody's willing to throw the flag, raise the alarm, and say, are we the bad guys here?
You know, when you were a child, you wrote about this, and I thought it was very, very poignant. You were the target of some bullies in your elementary school. And one day you decided to fight back, and you got hammered pretty hard by the principal. And, you know, you learned, I guess, the hard way that sometimes the bullies win. And in your case, it looks like at times the bully is winning here. It's disturbing to me, and I think to a lot of other Americans. What can we do?
You know, I think that there's a lot of reforms that could be proposed, but I think at all that we have to look back to our history. And the history is small R republicanism, localized. Don't think of it as defunding the police. We need to empower the local police. And those mechanisms exist.
I think that is a very good thing, because when you have a federal agency whose political leadership has become very political and very biased, and then they weaponize the power of government to go after only certain people who have a point of view they don't agree with. I mean, that is a dangerous threat. When I hear people talking about a threat to democracy, I don't know of anything more dangerous than the government becoming some type of ogre going after people because they don't agree with the position of the people in power. That's frightening.
Yeah, and you have two main threats. You have the ideological component, where the FBI is now this weaponized political apparatchik for this far left government. And then you have the statistical portion, which I've tried to raise attention to, and that's a quota system that the FBI operates under for the certain number of arrests they have to make and cases they have to open. And as a result of that, their budgets get boosted, and individuals, senior executives in the FBI, make between $30,000 and $50,000 in bonuses every year because their subordinates make a certain number of arrests.
That is also disturbing. Now, you came to a place where you couldn't deal with it anymore. They asked for your gun and your badge. You became a whistleblower. Now, normally in federal government, a whistleblower is supposed to be protected. How protected have you been?
I think anything other than that. I came forward, and I don't have to be right. The law says I just have to be reasonable. And as a result of me coming forward, the FBI contrived a way to suspend me from service. And in my case, they said that I improperly looked at the employee handbook, not blowing the whistle. I looked at the handbook improperly.
What's been the reaction from rank and file agents and other people that have seen what you have stood for?
You know, I've gotten some very positive feedback, especially from retired agents who said that I kind of represent the old school agent mindset that they had. But I think I was most impressed in the immediate aftermath of the hearing that we set up a give, send, go for the two gentlemen that sat at my sides who had been out of work for, in Marcus's case, a year and a half. Garrett's case had been about 9 months. And we received about 10,000 to 11,000 small donations from the American population and raised about $500,000 for them in a week.
Wow. And that's a wonderful way to say, these aren't rich guys. They were just doing law enforcement duty. They stood up and they cried foul when they knew it was happening. And for that, they got punished. But the American people have started coming through for folks like you and the others. And I think it's high time that we start realizing that your voices of courage, telling us what's really going on, the only way this gets fixed. Stephen, your book is fantastic. I really do hope that if people want to know from a firsthand perspective, not what somebody has heard, but what somebody has lived, this book tells it true blue. And I highly recommend it. It's got some great insights. And the story that you tell is just compelling. I want to say once again, on behalf of all of us here, both watching by television and in this room, thank you for your courage. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I hope you will go and pick up this new book. It's powerful. True Blue, My Journey from Beat Cop to Suspended FBI Whistleblower. It's available now, and we've got the links to get it on Huckabee.tv. Hey, Mike Huckabee here. Listen, if you love your mom, apple pie, and being conservative, you know you ought to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and click the like button, and show all the leftists out there that conservatives are thriving and patriotism is far from dead. Am I pandering too much? No way. I'm just getting started.